all seen the signs. Sometimes they are embroidered, sometimes painted, sometimes etched in wood. The signs that read, "Home is where the heart is," "Home, sweet home," "There's no place like home." We've seen it. Home. What does home mean to you? Last weekend, my family and I drove to Wisconsin to spend Thanksgiving with my siblings. And oftentimes when we cross the St. Croix River, I will often be heard saying, welcome to the motherland as we cross the bridge. And, well, maybe. But what's funny to that point, Elaine, as I crossed the river this time, Tim reminded me that I have lived in Minnesota as long as I have lived in Wisconsin. Ooh. What is it then about a place that makes it feel like home? Or is it a place at all? Chris Burton wrote, "Home and Hope in Ruth," and in this commentary on Ruth 1, Burton wrote, quote, "Home has a way of being in your bones. In this sense, you can be home anywhere because you take home with you." As I reflect on the book of Ruth, this first chapter this morning, and then crossing the St. Croix River to and from, I am mindful of the moments of growing up in my hometown with my family and friends, and how it takes a village, both physically and mentally, and how that translates to life here in Minnesota, creating a space of hospitality and welcome was at the core of my upbringing, and that has certainly been rooted in our home, and even here in this space, I think. In essence, I take home with me wherever I go, at least I hope I do. Hospitality and welcome are impacted, especially then when we make connections with individuals, family and friends alike. When we feel something deeply and we are connected, it is hard for it not to feel like home, or at least a place to belong. It is hard to feel connected, though, as the nights grow longer and winter cold and snow, if we ever get any, hushes the landscape. It is in this season we find ourselves cloistered and secluded and even a bit siloed. But the season of Advent, Kayla Craig writes, quote, "whispers an ancient truth. We were never meant to journey these paths alone. In a pull yourself up by the bootstraps culture, choosing communal life is both radical and deeply faithful," end quote. We see this in the story of Ruth and Naomi. Ruth, a Moabite woman, could have returned to her birth family, after her husband's death, following the expected path. Naomi, overcome with loss and steeped in grief, initially pushes Ruth away. She even renames herself Mara, meaning bitter, reflecting her belief that her life has been marked by divine disfavor. The Almighty has dealt bitterly with me. Instead of leaving, though, Ruth chooses a radical commitment to her mother-in-law, saying, "Do not press me to leave you, to turn back from you. Where you go, I go." Ruth's choice wasn't merely about devotion. It was the formation of a new family built not on blood, but on kinship, on the daring belief that our lives are better together. They are better intertwined. Kayla Craig writes, quote, "Sorrow can make us shrink into ourselves, believing that solitude is safer than the vulnerability of connection. When the weight of loneliness makes you feel forgotten and you wonder if your place in this world matters, It's easy to get sucked into a cascade of lies. You start thinking you're the only one carrying this weight of loneliness, the only one on the outside. End quote. And who hasn't felt this? Recent studies show that 1 in 2 Americans struggles with social disconnection. As I mentioned earlier, Dr. Vivek H. Murthy, the 19th and 21st Surgeon General of the United States, calls loneliness an epidemic. Loneliness not only hurts us on an individual level, but negatively impacts all of society. Feelings of isolation hurt our mental and physical well-being. Research has shown that loneliness can take the same toll on our bodies as smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. What's the cure? What's the antidote? Hospitality and welcome, perhaps? Perhaps cultivating compassionate community? Dr. Murthy writes, quote, "If we fail to do so, we will pay an ever-increasing price in the form of our individual and collective health and well-being, and we will continue to splinter and divide until we can no longer stand as a community or a country." End quote. We are so better together. And deep down in her bones, Ruth knew it. Naomi's grief doesn't deter her. Ruth keeps moving toward Naomi, embarking on a journey to a new beginning. As much as Naomi needed Ruth, Ruth needed Naomi. A basic picture of mutuality, which is deeply needed in our fractured world. Chris Burton writes, quote, "We may think it is time to go it alone or to let relationships atrophy into mere formalities, but hope says, hold on. Hope may compel us in unfamiliar places where our social standing falls precipitously, but let us remember that God is still writing our story, a story where our hope will encounter God's faithfulness." End quote. Ruth and Naomi's journey to Bethlehem is a pilgrimage of faith, mirroring another future trek to the same town by Mary and Joseph. Both stories, both journeys hold discomfort and uncertainty, yet the travelers take it on together, not by themselves, together. This kinship echoes through the lineage of Jesus himself, as Ruth, a woman who embodied the strength of connection over isolation, is named among his ancestors. Ruth put it all on the line. She put the cultural norms and rituals aside. The status quo was not as important as what was ahead. In the midst of heartbreaking loss, the temptation to believe that all is lost can be very seductive. Instead, Ruth demonstrates hope. Hope that this tragedy will not be the final chapter of her story. By moving ahead with Naomi, she believed that more hope was to be gleaned in those barley fields. More hope was to be written. More hope was to be lived. Now, I'm not oblivious that this season, this time of year, with Christmas trees and flickering candles and twinkling lights, are anything but joyous. They have a shadow side filled with loneliness and grief. And for many, it feels like anything but the happiest time of the year. And yet this season offers ample opportunity for kinship and connection, welcome and hospitality, to reach out to those grieving, to invite the lonely into our homes and hearts, and to show that in God's family, no one has to face their sorrows alone. What would it look like to foster deep connections in this season? Not just gatherings marked by exchanging pleasantries, but by sharing our messy, holy, complicated life. Isn't this the meaning of cultivating compassionate community? Doesn't this seem like a good idea for the church? The wisdom of Ecclesiastes reminds us two are better than one, for if they fail, one will lift up the other. Though often heard at weddings, this wisdom speaks to the fundamental human need for connection. No matter the relationship or what season of life we're in, we could go alone, but we weren't meant to. In each other's companionship, may we find the reflection of the one in becoming flesh chose to be with us, to share in our humanity, and to show us what we need from each other. Our hope is not found in isolation. Our hope is found in God's faithfulness through difficult times and in the people we encounter, the Ruths we encounter. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. You are my home. Amen.